Well, hello everyone. My name is Tara. If we haven't met yet, and I serve on our senior leadership team and at our Guelph campus as a missionary. Today, I just have one announcement for you guys. So, in case you haven't noticed, August is basically here, and that means Welcome Week is on the horizon. So, if you haven't been able to participate or experience a Lift Church Welcome Week yet, this is the year. Make sure you're listening to any announcements from your Simple Church Regional Director about planning nights, ways that you can serve this fall at Welcome Week. So these first couple of weeks of September are great opportunities for us to meet new people and welcome people back to the campus after the summer. So super important that you're paying attention, and definitely once you can, sign up for a spot to serve at a booth or an event, or plan a hangout with your Simple Church so that you can meet new people and introduce them to Jesus this fall. Also, if you don't have any Lift Church swag yet, send me a message. We will make sure you get some so that you can walk onto campus this fall, just representing Lift Church wherever you go. So send me a message if you need some, ask your skirt, or if you're coming to Simple Church Rally, you can grab some then. That's all from me today, but we have a really awesome video sharing a story from some of our skirts at McMaster. Graham and Lisa are going to be sharing a bit about why they decided to be Simple Church Regional Directors. So you can check that out now.
The plan was to kind of participate in the life of the church for a year as I was doing an apprenticeship. Very quickly for me, I came to the realization that church really is meant to be a family. And so we opted to stay and make this and commit to Lift Church being our family.
And then Graham stepped into the role of Simple Church Regional Director. And I think after a certain amount of time, we just kind of realized as a married couple, we're a team in life, so why not be a team in ministry as well? So I stepped into kind of this co-leadership position alongside Graham as skirts.
Realizing that the relationships that we had built and had come to very quickly cherish we couldn't give up. There was a greater cost in giving those relationships up and leaving, and greater benefit to staying, continuing to invest, especially when we think of kind of our call to make disciple makers, and we really realized that we could do that, make disciple makers here within the context of Lift Church really effectively.
That even though we're definitely not students anymore, that we still have a lot to offer the individuals within our church who are predominantly students. And so, we just kind of wanted to find a way to serve and to give back and to really just invest in this family. Coming to understand the importance of proximity to the campus, which is of course our mission field, as well as our church community. And so God quickly put on my heart, and then soon to follow Graham's heart, the desire to make our families move closer to campus, which took a fair amount of effort and sacrifice and creativity, but overall has been a huge blessing, just being more proximal to the campus and to our church family. So it's been really cool to see kind of God transform our hearts to really love our campus even more deeply now that we're just right in the thick of it.
Very quickly, as soon as we made that move, it became really clear that that wasn't something that I needed to be afraid of, and that actually having people stop by at any moment is actually really beautiful, and the best discipleship became more effective because we were so close to the campus as well as the people we're leading and discipling. Patience and understanding and my ability to challenge people.
I'd say I've grown and am growing in my capacity to put church at the center of my life. So really just, making sacrifices for the greater good of our church community and for God's kingdom as a whole. Just creating margin in my life for the people that we're discipling and who we love so deeply.
There is such deep joy in bringing the gospel to new campuses. The best moments leading as a regional director have been seeing people invite newcomers into our church family, seeing our church family grow, and seeing those new members come to know Jesus.
I think it's so cool to see the fruit of that faithful leadership and God's work. And those people may not otherwise have been exposed to the gospel. My piece of encouragement would just be to take the leap and know that you have your entire church family rooting for you and practically and prayerfully supporting you. You're not doing it alone. There can be such growth that happens both within you as a leader and hopefully in those that you will be leading as well. So go for it.
Hey everybody, and happy Sunday. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dan. I have the honor and privilege of serving as part of our senior leadership team. And today I get the double honor and privilege of bringing the word. So for those of you that might be new, something we do is we read through the Bible as a church through things called daily devos. If you don't have one, talk to the leader of the whatever campus you're at, they'll get you one. But then we go, and on Sundays, we preach through it. And so we're currently in the book of Judges. Now, Judges is, it's a strange book. There's a lot of crazy stories that happen. But one of the things that helps bring context to Judges is sort of the overarching theme. You see, a judge in the book of Judges isn't like a judge like we have today with a gavel and pronouncing judgments, but rather they're sort of like tribal leaders that pop up. Not of all of Israel, but of a couple tribes. I like to think of them sort of as heroes that show up when they're needed. And the book of Judges has a series of heroes that pop up because the nation of Israel keeps on getting itself into trouble. The way that happens is by this refrain that kind of goes through the book of, they did what is good in their own eyes. And so Israel goes and does what is good in their own eyes, and spoiler alert, it's not good in God's eyes. And it's this kind of juxtaposition of trusting ourselves versus trusting God. And so the entire book has this spiral of Israel goes and gets into trouble, and then a hero pops up, and things are good, and then they kind of do their own thing for a while and get into trouble again. But as the spiral goes on, the thing we get to notice is that the heroes, the judges themselves, start out pretty good, but then start to get worse and worse and worse. And so all of a sudden, the very heroes, the best that Israel has to offer, ends up being some pretty gnarly characters. And so this downward spiral, the best that Israel has to offer, it kind of shows that the longer we go and trust in ourselves instead of God, it gets worse and worse. And so today we're talking about Gideon. And the interesting thing about Gideon is he's sort of like the pivot point in the book of Judges. There's been 3 judges so far that have been pretty good, and then Gideon is where things start to go a little awry. He's a conflicting character because there's some aspects that are fantastic, that he's really good, and then there's other aspects that are not so good. But that very conflict ends up making him a great kind of example to get lessons out of. Specifically, there is a plethora of great lessons on leadership that we can learn from Gideon. But before we get any further, let's pray. God, I just want to thank you for the honor and privilege it is to come and bring your word. As always, God, I pray that I can just be invisible. Let this be your words and not my own. And God, I just pray that you can get all the glory. Let us leave this place inspired to follow you a little bit more closely. Amen. So, before I go any further, I mentioned this idea of leadership lessons, and that might have intimidated or put off some. So before I get into the meat of the sermon, I kind of want to talk a little bit about that and talk about leadership. Some of you might have thought to yourselves, like, I'm not a leader, so what does this have to do with me? What does this have to do with me? And so I kind of want to speak to you and ask you to consider two things before we go further. The first is that, well, we're led by leaders. And so good leadership is actually important to all of us because it helps us know when we're following a good leader or whether we're not following a good leader. So that's just kind of case one. But second is sort of getting a little bit more nuanced into the definition of leadership. Not everybody is called to large-scale organizational leadership. The book of Ephesians actually clearly talks about how there's a multitude of gifts, especially in the church, that we actually are all called to operate differently like a body. And we need different gifts, and we need people doing different roles. I'm a part of the senior leadership team here at Lift, and if that senior leadership team had 200 people on it, it would be functionally useless. We're not all called to large organizational leadership. But something the Bible does clearly call us to is to disciple others. The call of the everyday, ordinary follower of Jesus is to be a disciple-making disciple. Is at some point in your journey to look at somebody else and say, hey, come follow me as I follow Jesus. A call of every believer is eventually to lead others to be more like Jesus. And so I would define leadership as anybody who actually leads others. And so today's sermon, while it can be applicable to the large-scale organizational leadership, it's also applicable to the everyday, ordinary Christian because we're all called to disciple somebody. And as you go discipling somebody, whether you're leading the one, whether you're leading a simple church, whether you're leading a team, or whether you're one of our regional directors leading a whole campus, or whether you're going off and have some sort of large corporate leadership, ideally today's sermon will actually be applying to all different aspects of the scope, because we're all called to disciple others. So, in order to actually do that, though, we need to talk about Gideon. And the story of Gideon spans 3 chapters in the Bible, and that's just a whole lot to sit here and read. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on specific passages, but I want to give you sort of the larger strokes of the story first. So where we pick up with the story of Gideon is there's a rival nation, a rival tribe called the Midianites that are attacking Israel. They're oppressing them. It's bad time. And so Gideon was this total nobody. He says that he's like the least from like the least tribe, and he's like the lowest in his household. He's like super timid and scared. And an angel shows up and says that God is going to use Gideon to rescue his people. So Gideon goes through and basically doesn't believe him and goes through this whole series of tests, making sure and double checking, like, hey, God, like this is really what you want, right? And he kind of goes through it, and then finally Gideon's like, okay, I'm going to go do this. And then Gideon gets a few smaller missions first, and then he doesn't believe God some more and does a few more tests. And then finally he's going and he's raising up an army to attack the Midianites. And God immediately kind of shows up and says, no, there's too many people in your army, which seems confusing. He actually says in verse 2, quickly, the Lord said to Gideon, you have too many troops for me to hand the Midianites over to them, or else Israelite might elevate themselves and say that I saved themselves. This happens a few times where God goes and kind of winnows down the army until there's 300 people left attacking a whole army. God says, sweet, it's go time. Give him some trumpets, blow the horns, it'll all work out. And Gideon still doubts God. There's another test, and then finally goes and does it. And there's this really cool scene where the 300 soldiers kind of surround the Midianite army in this valley, and they all blow their trumpets, and the Midianites get all scared, and they start attacking themselves and run away. And Israel is victorious. And so we're going to pause here. The story goes on, and we'll get there later, but we're going to pause here to kind of focus on my first point. And that's that godly leaders trust in God's strength. I think we all kind of get this, at least from like afar. Like we understand like, oh yeah, we're supposed to rely on God's strength. But the interesting thing is that when I was doing my research, all the commentaries I read, all the research, everybody's kind of hard on Gideon. They're a little harsh. And they specifically go on and on about how he was so doubtful and asked for so many signs. They talk about the very first scene we see him in, he's actually hiding. But despite all this, and despite the fact that I kind of agreed, I kept coming back to the one specific verse right near the beginning. It's in Judges 6, verse 12. It's when the angel first appears to Gideon, and in verse 12 it picks up, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, valiant warrior." Valiant warrior. I was pondering this, and I was thinking about this fearful dude Gideon that everybody was like kind of beating up, and I realized that, you know what? For all his fear, he steps up every time. He does what God asks him to every time. And that's actually kind of brave. Like he's clearly terrified. He's clearly scared and timid, but he still does it. There's this quote, it's attributed to a whole bunch of people, and there's all kinds of variations, but it's that courage is not the absence of fear, but the judgment that there is something more important than that fear. See, when I look at Gideon, at least at this point, I see someone who decides that trusting in God is more important than the fear he obviously feels. Like the man goes and attacks an opposing army with 300 dudes armed with trumpets. Are you going to tell me that doesn't take some courage? Like, here's the thing. All of a sudden I was like thinking about it. I'm like, no, if I was going to do that, I'd ask for a whole bunch of signs too. Like, if I have 300 people's lives under my care and I'm going to attacking with musical instruments, God is better be sure that I'm going to be like quadruple checking. Like, you're sure. Like, love ya, we'll totally do what you want, like, totally willing to follow in obedience, but like, boy, this seems ludicrous. So let's just make like a fifth times the charm. Let's make sure that like, this is the plan. I would triple check too. See, when we truly trust in God's strength, He will inevitably lead us to places that we're afraid of. When I was writing this sermon, I was thinking about the old worship song Oceans, where it talks about like following God on the ocean. The bridge goes like, Spirit lead me where my heart wouldn't go of itself. This is paraphrasing. It's all pretty lyrics. But it asked me to go and follow him a place that I wouldn't go myself, a place that I'd be fearful to tread. Godly leaders trust God more than their old fear. This whole building is a testament to that. The journey to get Rubik's 4 is a testament that our leader Robin trusted God and trusted his providence over the fear of everything. And it's not just about big things, it's about small things too. When you're discipling somebody, there will be moments of fear. Moments when one of your disciples comes and asks you a question that you feel not prepared at all to answer. Moments when you see something you need to go and speak into somebody's life or call them to a higher standard, but you're nervous about how they're going to react. Moments when we need to go to the people that we care for and ask them uncomfortable questions. We need to talk to them about boundaries in relationships or porn or a variety of other topics, things that are scared to go and talk about. Welcome Week is coming up. Talking to strangers about Jesus and about church can be scary. Man, talking to strangers, period, can be scary. I remember a few years ago, I was helping out at Guelph's Welcome Week, and we were doing some gum handing out, and I was talking to Andrew Peterson there, and he was basically asked the question of aren't I nervous about going and doing this? I was like, yeah, of course I am. It's super awkward. I don't like talking to people about these things. But it was something that I knew was worth enough. I knew that going to a first year and helping them understand the hope of Jesus was worth my own uncomfortableness. And over time, you get a little bit more used to it, and you can do the uncomfortable thing a little bit easier, and then God asks you to do even bigger uncomfortable things. But in that moment, it was, this person, whether they receive me or not, giving them a gum I think is worth me feeling awkward for a little bit. The more we trust God with, the more He'll actually trust us back, and the more He's able to actually use us to do incredible things for His kingdom. So, godly leaders trust in God's strength. For point 2, we need to jump back into the story, and things don't go as great from here. So, Gideon, he routs the army, chases them down. Chapter 8 has some weird, violent episodes, but then ultimately he kind of returns home as this hero. And all the people are like, "Hey, you're pretty cool, Gideon. You wanna be our king?" And Gideon has this seemingly great moment where he's like, "No, I can't be king. Only God should rule us." And that glimmer of hope that things are going to be all right immediately just gets snuffed out because Gideon immediately is like, "You know what? I'm not going to be king. Only God's going to be king. But I'll take some gold. You can just give me a bunch of gold." And he sets up a tax program. And then he's like, "Okay, and I'm going to set up this kind of separate system of worship in my hometown." Which directly contradicts God. And then he's like, and I'll also have a whole whack of concubines and wives and take some from the people that aren't Israelite, even though that's wrong. And you know what? I'm going to name one of my kids Abimelech, which literally translates to "my father is king." Gideon's like, no, I'm not going to be king. I'm not calling myself king. My son's name is "my father is king," but I wouldn't say that about myself. It's his name. That's it. But yeah, he doesn't end super well. But interestingly, the thing that has the most long-lasting negative impact is actually the thing that is seemingly the most innocuous. Judges 8, verse 27. Gideon made an ephod from all of this and put it in Ophrah, his hometown. Then all of Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his household. So what's an ephod? Well, it's a priestly garment, has some cool stones on it, and 2 of these stones were specifically designed to hear from God, to get kind of a yes or no answer. And at the surface level, this actually seems like a pretty good thing. He's been hearing from God, and Gideon was the one who wanted to make sure, and so he was like, "Okay, I'm going to set up a system to where I can hear from God directly, and it's going to be super clear, and whenever I have a question, I can go and ask God." And wants to be extra certain. This seems like a good thing. It's certainly nothing that's going to hurt anybody. But the issue is that God had specifically commanded Israel not to do this, to keep one of these things, to keep it in the tabernacle. And so my second point is that godly leaders ask what God says is good. They don't decide for themselves. They don't trust their own idea of what is good. They ask what God says is good. And we're back to that refrain that goes through the whole book of Judges, that Israel did what was good in their eyes instead of asking what God says is good. That line goes all the way back to Genesis 3 with Adam and Eve, when Eve saw that the apple looked good in her eyes. Or the fruit. I know it's not an apple, guys. And so I feel like Gideon is such a good example of this, though, because it's practical and understandable. He's not actively going and doing an evil thing. He's not going and murdering a bunch of people. He's doing something that seems good, that he thinks is good. But that's the issue. It's not about us going and doing the obviously bad thing. It's not about us doing the thing we think is good, but it's actually contrary to what God says. My best friend, way back in undergrad, he was procrastinating a bit of an assignment, and he finally is the light. And it's a big assignment. Basically, his grade is dependent on this assignment. So he's working on it the night before. He's on track. And then a friend of ours kind of goes up to him and is like, "Hey, I just really need to talk. I don't really remember what it was about. Don't think it was that serious." And my best friend, thinking he's doing what is good, goes and decides, you know what? No, caring for my friend at this moment is more important than the assignment. So I'm going to go and do the good thing and go and spend the night talking with my friend, trying to cheer him up, making sure that he's not alone. And that seems good, except that my friend didn't finish his assignment and failed the entire class. He failed the course. What he thought was good, he chose that over his responsibility to his schoolwork. Another friend, in undergrad, during an assignment, other people in the class asked for his help, and so he didn't quite have enough time to fully help them, and so he just gave them his finished assignment. And they went and immediately copied it, word for word, basically, and they all handed it in, and they all got zeros. He chose what he thought was good, which was helping people, over the thing that he knew was right, which was not letting people copy him. There are entire churches, entire denominations, probably entire governments that have lost theology or lost their way doing what they think is good to help people, but in reality ends up leading them astray. And they end up compromising the things that they originally held as values. My favorite kind of legendary hero is Robin Hood. It's great. You rob from the rich, you give to the poor. He's a hero. He oppresses the oppressors. It's fantastic. And it's wrong. It's wrong to steal. That's just, it doesn't matter if you're stealing from a rich person or a poor person. It's wrong to do that. But it feels right. Robin Hood feels like the hero. There's even a friar, a pastor that joins them. And it's it feels right, but it is wrong. Jesus says that it is wrong. It doesn't matter if the rich are actually stealing from us. Jesus says that if somebody goes and steals from us, to offer him our cloak as well. Jesus says if somebody strikes us, to turn our other cheek. Jesus says to wait until marriage to have sex. Jesus says to love your enemy. Jesus says a whole lot of things that don't make sense to me, but I know are right because he said it. And it doesn't matter what it feels like to me. It doesn't matter if I understand why. Jesus knows better. Because I can sit here and I can justify all the reasons that the sheriff of Nottingham deserved what Robin Hood did to him. I can tell myself that no one knows of this behavior and that it's not really hurting anybody, and so I can use that to justify whatever I want to do late at night. I can go online and find random sources that can find random loopholes in the original language and kind of twist meanings to kind of justify my behavior or my choices or my lifestyle. But ultimately, we're not the ones that decide what's right and wrong. And the reason we can't is because we can't trust our own vision of what's right and wrong, because we're sinful. Not in the sense of we're inherently evil and sinful, but rather that the disease of sin has warped the very way we view the world. The lens through which we view all of life is blurred. We can't see clearly what's right and wrong because sin has affected us. But when we spend time with God, when we spend time in the Word of God, when we go and spend time praying and in community, we begin to learn more about what God says is right and wrong. And our lens becomes clear. The way we view the world becomes clear, not in of our own power, but because we learn more and more what God says is good. What God says is right and wrong. Godly leaders trust in God's strength and not our own. And godly leaders ask what God says is good. And finally, godly leaders give glory to God. So I want to quickly rewind all the way back to the beginning of the sermon, when Gideon was facing off against the army. And God said this in chapter 7, verse 2. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many troops for me to hand the Midianites over to them, or else Israel might elevate themselves over me and say, 'My own strength saved me.'" Now let's fast forward a little bit to chapter 8. verses 22. Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you as well as your sons and your grandsons, for you delivered us from the power of Midian." Not God delivered us. Gideon, you delivered us. Gideon took the credit. The whole trumpet with 300 people thing scaring the Midian army, that was supposed to be a testament to God's power, but instead it turned into a display of Gideon's cunning. It wasn't that Gideon didn't have a part to play, but he was not the one that saved Israel from Midian. And when it comes to credit, when it comes to where we give glory, people often kind of fall into two extremes. They have to try to take all the glory for themselves, or they just give it away. They can't accept compliments, and they almost have this false humility where they don't accept that they actually had a part to play. But both are wrong. Giving glory to God isn't about denying the part that you have to play. It's about your heart posture. It's about whether you ultimately did what you did to raise yourself up or to raise God up. Do we disciple others because we want them to know Jesus more, or because we like the influence that we have? Do we agree to step up and lead a team because we see a need and want to serve, or do we like the idea that we're a leader and it's good on a resume? Do we apprentice because we believe it's the right thing to do and it's a step that God's calling us to, or do we do it because we just don't want to disappoint somebody? When we disciple others, are we trying to make them more like Jesus or more like ourselves? A wise leader once told me, humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. You're great. You watching this video, you are fantastic. You're a follower of Jesus. You're doing a great job. Being humble isn't denying that you are beautifully and wonderfully made, that God knit you together, that you have passions, you have things to offer others. Being humble isn't about denying those things. Being humble is instead realizing that God is greater and choosing to use all those fantastic aspects of yourself for His glory. A godly leader always points to Jesus. And in a sense, we can kind of actually learn this from Gideon as well. You see, if we zoom way out from the book of Judges and in the story of Gideon, we can learn that the ultimate point of Gideon, of Judges, of the entire Old Testament, is that we by ourselves can't do this. Humanity, we can't do this by ourselves. And so Gideon, every judge, every leader in the entire Old Testament is actually meant to leave us wanting more, meant when we read it to leave us hoping for a hero that would finally actually be able to do it well. When Gideon starts off great and ends kind of poorly, we're supposed to be left hoping for somebody that will come and actually be able to end well, to be able to finally be faithful. And then the leader is Jesus. Jesus is the one that the whole Old Testament points to. And so the very story of Gideon points to Jesus. And likewise, our lives should point to Jesus. Not because we're a great leader, not because we have everything in and of ourselves, but actually because we're fallible. Because we're not perfect. Because we need to trust in God's strength and not our own. Because we don't know what's right or wrong by ourselves, but we need to ask Jesus what He says is right or wrong. And because ultimately, everything we do isn't about raising ourselves, it's about the kingdom of heaven. It's about bringing glory to God. So that's where I kind of want to end today. Godly leaders trust in God's strength. They ask what He says is good and do everything for the glory of God. And so as we finish today, I want to invite you to pray one of three prayers with me. These are prayers that, well, the first two, the one I pray, I guess I all the time as well. These are prayers that I pray when I go to bed at night. I pray when I wake up in the morning. And I know my day always starts off well when I remember to pray one of these prayers. The first is that prayer that I begin almost every sermon with, is that everything I do is for God's glory. When I come and preach, I have to pray that I don't do this to elevate myself, but rather I do it to bring him glory. And so I ask God, hey, help me do this for you and not for me. The other prayer that I pray is I ask God, hey God, what do you want me to do today? I wake up I go to bed assuming that the day is not going to be one of no consequence. And so I ask God, hey, what kingdom business do you have for me today? What way can I follow you more? What way can I take a step, a leap of confidence? What way can I trust in your strength? And finally, the last prayer is maybe you haven't followed Jesus, or maybe you are, but it's to understand that, hey, God, I am a sinner in need of your grace. I am naturally sinful. I don't see the world clearly. And so, God, help me rely on you. God, save me. Let's pray, church. God, you are so good. And I want to thank you that despite all the reasons that we don't have it in ourselves, you still choose to use us as a gift. You include us in your mission to save this world. And so, God, I pray for myself. I pray for everybody watching. I pray for our church that we can trust in your strength more. That we can more and more align ourselves to what you say is good and not what we think is good. And that ultimately we can do it all for your glory. Amen. Thanks, church. Love you all, and I hope you have a great night.